Good morning, Laurie. How are you today?
David, hey, great to see you. I'm awesome.
That is great. Now, where are you located today?
I'm in the great city of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Yes, yes. Now, are you a native of Pittsburgh?
I am not. I am
You're
not.
not.
I'm an adopted daughter of the city. I'm originally from Albany, New York.
Okay, so Ithaca wasn't too far to go for you.
That's right. It was not. It was only about 3 hours away.
Okay, and then what brought you to Pittsburgh?
After graduating from college, my husband and I moved around Pennsylvania with different corporations. I was with Ingersoll Rand Company,
Mm-hmm.
and I was with a division in Shippensburg. And
Okay.
after 4 years, decided to get my master's, get my MBA, and decided to move to Pittsburgh. My husband had gotten a nice job with McKinsey and Company, and
Yep.
here we are,
Okay, and then
25
you
years later.
you get your MBA in Pittsburgh, right, at Carnegie
I
Mellon.
did at Carnegie Mellon, yes.
Okay. Well, let's dig into this. So the Business Transition Sherpa, where did this nickname come from? Did you come up with this yourself, or did somebody else give you that title?
It's kind of an amalgamation of things. I remember
Okay.
talking to my husband about a trip that he and I had taken in 1997. We did a trek, we did a hike, and this idea of somebody guiding you
Hmm.
and stuck with me, and as I was thinking about what I'm doing working with business owners, it's not just one moment in time, it's over a period of time. And
Sure.
I really feel like my role is to be a guide. I don't have all the answers. I have a path, I have tools, and just like a Sherpa and the great work that they do, it's that same idea. Is we're on a journey together. Entrepreneurs build their business sometimes on their own, but most likely not. Entrepreneurs are building their companies with other people. And so when
Yeah.
they get to this other side of the mountain, so to speak, and thinking about their next chapter, why would they go about that by themselves? And I want to be the person that helps guide them.
Hmm. Yeah, I love the description of what you do because it picks up the fact that it's a journey. It's not a point in time, and it's tough to do by yourself. In my experience, most closely held small to medium sized business owners only sell a business once, right?
That's right.
Has that been
And
your
we
experience?
can we can regret things in our experience. We can regret what we do and wish we did something differently, or we do not take an action and we regret not taking that action. And my book, the whole reason I wrote the book, the Business Transition Handbook, was to help people proactively so that they don't have regrets. It's a very big, lofty goal to not have regrets in life. But if we
Sure.
can be proactive and we can understand what it takes to build a more valuable, transferable business, and then
Mhm.
understand what resources we might want to have on our side. I like to say, David, you can't do exit planning when you're exiting. It's just too late. So if you
Sure.
give yourself the time and space to work on having a more valuable, transferable business, the good news is that it's going to be a lot more fun to run your company. It's going to have an economic benefit to you. And then in the future, you'll have more options. You'll have more valuable options too.
Hmm. Yeah, I really enjoyed reading your book. In fact, behind you there, I believe, is a blown up cover
Yes,
art.
it
Is that
is.
right?
That's right. Yeah, it was really interesting to write the book. I guess I could say it's my first book. I don't know that I'll have a second, but this, no matter what, is my first book. And it was challenging, but at the same time, it was fun. It was like a giant puzzle. Once I mapped out what I believe the big pitfalls are, right? So the subtitle of the book is how to avoid succession pitfalls. Each chapter in the book, I don't know if you picked up on this as you were reading it, but each chapter is a pitfall. What do you want to avoid? And so what I tried to do was put myself in the reader's seat, the entrepreneur seat. And how I developed that perspective was from my own experiences, client experiences, and then integrating case studies and other learnings from my podcast. I have a show called Succession Stories that you will be a part of soon. And there are so many valuable things to learn from other people's wins and losses, and challenges. And that's what I've always sought out to do with my show. The show is about 3 years old at this point. And when I was writing the book, I had, I think, about 120 recordings. So that's a lot of knowledge and content. And what was so fun for me, David, was I was going back into the archives of a discussion. Every show I have has a transcript. And of course, I don't remember everything, but when I would write a chapter and I would need a case study, I had space for a case study in that particular spot for a particular topic. I would think, okay, which shows should I go back to? Dive into those transcripts and then find these golden nuggets. And it was just so interesting to have the recall in writing of, oh yeah, she said that was an amazing conversation. Our memories are not long, right? We have only so much storage in our brains.
Exactly.
So it was really cool to go back to that body of knowledge that I had created. And I began to appreciate that body of knowledge even more. I think this case studies bring the book to life. I'd like to hear what you think about that. But that's what I hear from my readers is they love the learning and the concepts, the business concepts in the book. And they think that it's like me having a conversation with them by sharing these case studies and stories along the way.
Yeah, I agree. There were a number of, there was a lot of great stuff in there, but some of the particular ones I kind of wanted to dive in with you on is, so this is a little bit of a quiz to see how much of your book you remember.
Okay.
Fun. When people decide to sell their business, do they just automatically sell it, or do some portion of them, are they unable to sell the business?
There's a mix, as you can imagine.
Yeah. What percentage are able to actually sell it in the small business space?
It's a surprisingly low number. The statistics out there is that every 2 out of 10 companies in the lower middle market actually sell. So that leaves 8 out of 10 not selling. And you could ask, well, why is that? And there's a lot of reasons why. Sometimes along the way, we have the 5 Ds kind of pop up, or always also known as the 6 Ds. These Ds are taboo things sometimes. We don't want to talk about them, but they're real and we do need to talk about them. Could be the death of an owner, could be divorce, could be disaster like COVID, we'd put it in that category, or disaster like fires, and the business or the market has experienced as something traumatic. It could be, did I say divorce already? Divorce is another D. So these Ds are something we can plan for. We don't want them to happen, but we do need to be prepared. So if we're not prepared for the 6 Ds, they can really wreak havoc on a business, particularly death. The death of an owner can throw a business into a tailspin. And I did cover that at some level in the book with a couple of episode snippets of people who had experienced that. The other reason why businesses don't sell, David, is because they're just not transferable. Yeah. If they are so owner dependent and owner centric, that can be a really big reason why it won't sell. And it's hard for owners to see that. Sometimes owners think that they are the secret sauce. Yeah. I have a business assessment that one time a marketing firm, the owner of a marketing firm took this assessment, and she said, oh my God, she goes, I didn't realize I was standing in the way. She thought she's a photographer, she's the creative, she's got the client relationships. And she realized at that moment, oh my goodness, I am making my company less valuable. So there's a pivot in our brains when we recognize some of the elements that help create a more transferable business. And companies that have an owner who don't necessarily see the business as an asset, they see it as a job, or they see it as a piggy bank. Those are different things, because if you see your business as an asset, you're going to want to create value in that asset over time. You're also going to want to protect that asset. If it's a job, you might just accept it is, and it's not growing, it's staying the same. Maybe you're not reinvesting in the business, you're not reinvesting in yourself or your people. And let's just jump to an example. I have a client who, in his favor, had very loyal people. However, once he got to his 60s, as did his key employees, and everybody's looking to retire, buyers looking at that business said, oh my goodness, how transferable is this business when all the key people are going to retire at the same time?
Mm-hmm.
So he had saved money, so to speak, by not bringing in new people, kind of underneath and over, over a period of training. And so he recognizes that now, but it's too late.
Sure. Yeah, I was having this conversation yesterday with a group of CEOs, and we were talking about enterprise value, increasing it, owner dependency. And there's a guy that owns a small boutique intellectual property law firm, and they were asking him how sellable law firms are in general, and he said not very. And from his perspective, that he said there's things he could do to make the business run without him better, but his model that he really likes to work with his clients directly. He doesn't like an associate between them. And so that, and a couple of his clients are actually in the room, and they're like, and he's like, yeah, if I had like some associates, that could potentially lower the fees to the client, because there's more leverage. And the clients are like, no, we'd rather pay more and have you. So I've noticed in professional services, there's this trade-off between what, if you really want to have delighted clients, sometimes that's at odds with making your business the most valuable. And I know my business is like that. I mean, I've got huge owner dependency issues because I am the key relationship. But I've gotten peace with the fact that it's just not very sellable, and I like being a craftsman, and just like it is.
Yeah, so, and that isn't that the important thing. If you recognize it and are accepting of it, hey, you know what? That's okay. Not every business is going to be an asset to sell to another buyer, and that's totally okay. With the law firm, just to circle back, because I do have some professional experience with law firms, one of the catch-22 things about law in particular is the code of ethics that they have to abide by.
The non-competes, the non-compete.
Yeah, so if a lawyer leaves a law firm, there's certain restrictions on when they can inform their clients and taking their clients with them and yada yada. And I know there's lots of gray areas. So I'm not going to talk about all of the nuances there. My point is that with law firms also, there could be other types of professional services that run into this, but in law in particular, what clients will say is that they hire lawyers, not law firms.
Yeah.
And so when you're tied, just like you're talking about with that particular partner, that the clients are willing to pay more because they want to work with that particular partner, it could be highly likely that that client would jump and go with them no matter where they are. That can be particularly concerning for an acquiring firm, knowing that they may have some stickiness to certain clients and then they may not have other stickiness. So it really is dependent. If there's a firm that's acquisitive and looking at buying other professional services, whether it's law or any other profession, I work with engineering firms quite a bit. And in engineering firms, there might be contracts, but those contracts are not assignable. And it might influence not only the type of transaction that we would do, either an asset sale or entity sale, but it also would influence potentially on the transition for the sellers and how long they might want to stay, or the buyers might want them to stay under either an employment agreement or a consulting agreement. It could also influence whether or not there's an earnout. You could structure an earnout, for example, if the buyer wants to structure an earnout to ensure a certain percent of those contracts are assigned over whatever time period, a year or a year and a half. So it could influence it in a big way.
So talk to me about, and thank you for that. Talk to me about what you enjoy most about being a business transition Sherpa, or not, I shouldn't say but the business transition Sherpa. What are some of the aspects of that in working with those companies that you just find particularly satisfying or rewarding?
One of the things that I experienced as a CEO of a privately held company was the loneliness and I'm being in my own head and having big questions and not really knowing where to go. And I find that I bring kind of this EQ, if you will, the smarts and the know-how and experiences and questions. And then I bring, or excuse me, the IQ around that. And then the EQ, which is more of the emotional side. I've always been a kind of person that people confide in. Obviously, this is a highly confidential type of scenario. But I talk with people, I talk with my clients about the business for sure, right? That's the practical side of everything. But we also talk about the personal side. We have to talk about them because remember earlier in our conversation, I talked about regrets.
Yeah.
And there's some alarming statistics out there about experiencing regrets at least 1 year after the sale. So I'm kind of on this mission to help business owners find clarity in a way that makes sense for them, for their family, for their stakeholders, which includes employees and other shareholders and their communities that they serve. You know, a lot of people feel after a transaction that they let so-and-so down. Maybe they let their employees down. Maybe they let their communities down. I had a guy on my show whose family business, fourth generation chlorine cleaning product was sold in grocery stores. And he could not walk down the aisle anymore. He couldn't bear to see that product under another name or owned by another. And he said, yeah, you know, there was a pride. We used to, a small town, and we had our name on the baseball team, and, you know, people knew who I was. And the identity that this particular person had, his family name was on the company. So identity is a really big part of it, David. People go through almost like a withdrawal. And if they're not excited about what's next, right, this pull factor, what's pulling you forward to your next thing, if we're not excited about it, it can be really, I mean, you can imagine worst case scenarios, and those things do happen, but the in-between space is not that great either. So for what makes me feel that I'm helping entrepreneurs, I've always orbited entrepreneurs with a great respect for the risk that they take. And I've come to know family businesses as a category also. So there's the founder-led, family-led, privately held company. I've worked in venture-backed, so no offense to venture-backed folks, but they're not really a focus for me. I'm really focused on, call it the bootstrapped or family, you know, family-led companies where they're the everyday entrepreneur making it happen.
Yeah.
And this sense of clarity, you know, clarity on 3 core types of goals is where we focus: business, personal, and financial. And there's a lot of work to be done there. And I think that's what makes me motivated, makes me feel appreciated by my clients. They are awesome people. I work with some amazing people that are doing really wonderful things for their community, for their family. They have excellent intentions. They just don't know how to put it all together. And I don't either, right? I don't have all the answers, as I said earlier. But what I do have is I have an awesome Rolodex, and I have an awesome way to bring professionals together and collaborate and help my client assemble a business owner transition team, advisory team, to help them make big decisions along the way. And again, this clarity, you know, is the number one thing that I think my clients benefit from.
Yeah. No, that's really important, because as you talk about in the book, unfortunately, 100% of the business owners are going to exit the business, right? I mean, just like 100% of us are going to exit this earth. And I was thinking when you were talking about that fourth generation gentleman who couldn't walk down the grocery aisle, but it's one of those things, but it wasn't like he really had, he must not have had a great way to avoid that, right? Because he wasn't going to run the business forever. So you come into, you know, what are the options basically if somebody's not immortal, you know, what are the options to exit a business? Because, you know, there's several paths, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to finish the statement with 100% of business owners are going to leave one day, there's a big however, you know, however, very few are planning for that day.
That leave on their terms.
To leave on their terms. And when we have a plan we're more likely to achieve it. That's just how it works, right? That's why we do strategic planning for businesses. So why don't we do strategic planning for our exit or our transition? And that's really the main advocacy I have in the book is let's have a process. Let's have an understanding of what it takes. So to your question, I think I address it quite a bit in one of my favorite chapters, which I think is chapter 6, which is who should own your business after you. Yeah. And it shines a spotlight on the different kinds of buyers. When I do workshops, David, I do webinars and I do in-person workshops, and I put up this slide and I have essentially 3 columns and I go through some examples of each bucket, 3 buckets. And people's eyes light up. They take out their camera. They start taking photos of this one particular slide. And it is enlightening because we hear about certain kinds of buyers and we don't know that there might be other options out there. And maybe not every option's a fit. So what I advocate for is let's understand what are some exit options for your company and which ones might be a better fit than others and why. Let's prioritize those and let's come up with option A, B, C. And if option A doesn't work out, then we know we've got an option B. It's just like in any negotiation. If you have the power to walk away, then you know you're going to get the right deal for you. It's when you don't feel that you have any other options that you feel pinched. So that's why, back to the conversation about the 5 or 6 Ds, if an owner passes away and the company is going in a tailspin with employees leaving and the spouse doesn't know what to do and they've inherited this company, they've never worked in it, it's a mess. And the buyers come out like sharks and there's chum in the water. Yeah. We want to avoid that. We want to avoid that. So yeah, I mean, we could talk about who are the different kinds of buyers if you want.
Sure. Yeah, because I mean, just off the top of my head, we've got, and passing it on to the next generation, right? Selling it to the employees, a third party buyer. What are some of the other options?
Yeah, let me just frame it out in that way. Right. Visually, I'm kind of working left to right as I talked about these 3 columns, and I put it in that order for a reason. So the first column is strategic buyers. The middle is financial buyers, and the one on the right is related buyers. So the examples,
that's
examples you mentioned, family and managers would be in the related buyers category. Typically speaking, that is going to be more of a fair market value type of approach to valuing the business, or what price you might expect for your business. And if you kind of go left on that chart, then the price expectation should go up, right? Strategics generally, not always, but generally speaking, will pay the most. And why is that? Well, and also what's a strategic? So a strategic is an entity. It's a company. It could be a competitor. It could be a marketplace partner, a vendor. It could be a customer. It could be in an adjacent industry to yours where they want to make moves, either geography wise or into your industry if they're not part of it yet. So those are strategics. And typically speaking, and this was my experience going through a pretty big M&A transaction with a 3rd generation company, that we were acquired by a Fortune 50. And believe me, they had an M&A playbook and when they're that big and they've done that many transactions. So for us, it was understanding what's the fit, what will this look like? And for them, I'm sure in their financial models, it was about leverage. What assets do they keep? What employee teams might they cut? And how do they gain some cost leverage? And so that's typical, where these pieces of the business might be kind of bolted into something else. Maybe it's standalone, maybe it's bolted in, but that's typically why strategics can pay more, because on the back end, as they're modeling out their financials, they know what costs they're going to take out. Right. We don't necessarily know that, but that's what they're looking at. Financial buyer, most often we think of private equity firms, and private equity groups will invest on a time horizon, roughly 5 to 7 years, could be longer. And they'll want to buy low, sell high. And so in between, they're investing in that business to improve it. They're putting in management teams, and they will take a larger entity, maybe keep it as a standalone, and that would be a platform deal. And a platform deal may eventually have other firms acquired to tuck underneath it. Those acquisitions we call tuck-ins or add-ons. And because they are taking assets and putting them into something larger, you could say, oh, well, that kind of sounds like the strategic. And the answer is, yeah, it kind of does. So that's why in a private equity deal, the hybrid, as we might also call it, could, from a multiple standpoint, look more like a strategic offer. So that's just a little financial nuance there. But typically speaking, private equity groups are going to be the biggest, buyers out there. There's still a lot of dry powder. And another big category that I like to spotlight, well, there's two others I would put under this financial bucket. One is family offices. Family offices might be investing in privately held companies in different asset classes. So for example, I had a family office, second generation was on my show, and he talked about what he and his father's investment thesis is. And they're focused on warehousing, like storage, storage unit for consumer storage. So you can rent one for a year or whatever and put your stuff in it. So they like that asset class because it has a recurring revenue model to it. And that's just one example. And what's really interesting, if you compare the time horizons for these investments, well, a family office is looking for a buy and hold more likely than buy and sell in a short period of time. So as I said earlier about fit, this is where it's really important. If the seller doesn't want to be in a situation where it could be, sold to the one fish and gobbled up by another, they want to be held for like a longer period of time in perpetuity, then maybe they should look to, talking with family offices who are doing acquisitions in their space. So that's a category that is kind of under the radar. And I just put a spotlight on it in the book. And then the third one are ESOPs, which is a, think of it like almost like a 401k program for your people, where when they retire from your company, they're incentivized to stay. And when they retire, they will get a distribution check. And so an ESOP is an interesting option for some other companies. Again, not a fit for everyone, but it might be a fit for companies of a larger size with enough employee base where, again, you're going to have a liability at some point to pay these people. So you have to be able to fund that. But what happens in that transaction is that the company becomes a tax-free entity. And so that's a real incentive, for companies to reinvest and acquire others. And it can be very, very positive for the culture too.
Yeah, I know quite a bit about ESOPs because you were kind enough to introduce me to Mike Silverman. And in fact, he and his partner, Matt, were a guest on my podcast a few episodes ago. And it's really interesting on the, some of the ESOP opportunities. And I'm glad you brought up the family office because, right, people don't think of that. But when I think about what I think of philosophically is the super family office, I think about Berkshire Hathaway's acquisition targets. But the problem is, I think now they're up to where, when I started reading Warren's annual letters, they were looking for businesses with enterprise value, I think, of like 25 million and up. And I think the last I checked, it's $500 million or $1 billion and up, just because $25 million companies don't move the needle for them. But yeah, and it's kind of like their sales pitch is similar to the family office sales pitch. So I guess one way to think of it is, if you like being an acquiree of Berkshire Hathaway, but you're smaller than $500 million, then maybe a family office might make sense. But even then, when you think about Berkshire's acquisition requirements, they want a business that runs independently of them. They do not want to manage the business. So you're right back to a business that can run without the owner is more valuable for everybody.
Yeah, they have the portfolio largely independent of each other. They've kept the brands, I think, pretty separate because they appreciate the brand and the competitive moat, as they like to call it, around that business. I think they look for companies that have a competitive market differentiation. So it makes sense that they don't muddle the water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have there been any positive surprises from writing the book that you didn't anticipate when you wrote it?
Surprises. Let me think about that. I think just the reviews, have been so delightful and meaningful to me. And I guess I just didn't think about it. I don't know that it's a surprise. It was just, maybe I could say a surprise and delight, just to see how this book is helping people, or how they've told me that it's helping people. I think that has been a really lovely outcome as an author. You put good in the world, and you hope goodness comes back, or you hope that it's helping, but you don't really know unless people tell you.
Yeah.
And so that's been really great. I would say the other is with my clients. I have my clients, I meet with them, on a regular basis. And I have clients that are reading the book. And then when I meet with them, they're like, yeah, I just read chapter 5. Let's talk about it. So this combination of, I'm not going to quite do this myself, right? I'm going to read the book, I'm going to get knowledge, but I still want to work with someone to help me along the way, was really reinforcing that what I expected that, frankly. And I think it's important. I do think people can go through this book on their own. And, at some point in this, call, I'll give the listeners an option to how to make the most of it, but you can do it on your own. You can. What I think is human nature is we want someone to hold us accountable.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, not necessarily a surprise, but very reinforcing that is true. And that's why, just a kind of a pre-announcement here, I'm going to be creating an online course from the book, so that it can help more people in a different way. And hopefully they'll watch the videos and they'll read the book. And what I'm aiming to do is reach a wider audience of entrepreneurs, not just the people who are, 3 to 5 years out. This is really a book, I think, if you are beyond startup phase, but you're growing your business, why not read this book and understand what it's going to take to create a more valuable exit when you're ready. So it's exciting. I'm planning to launch it in the first quarter of 2024.
Oh, that is exciting. If somebody's interested in learning more about that, do you have any place for them to go yet, or are we too soon?
We are too soon, but that's a great idea. I should put up like a waiting list or something on my website. But the Business Transition Handbook.com is the website page for the book.
BusinessTransitionHandbook.com.
Okay. Yeah, the Business Transition Handbook.com is a page on my site, so they'll see all other pages too. But this is the landing page for the book. So what I might do is I'll put up a blurb at some point about a waiting list for the class. And I'm excited about it. Like I said, I aim to reach more people and help more people with it.
Yeah. And that accountability is interesting, because one of the things I see with our clients is that one of the things that's interesting about our clients is that 90% of them have revenues between 10 and 100 million, probably similar to a lot of your clients. And the vast majority of them do not borrow money. They've been financially successful enough. They've been able to, internally fund growth. And because of, and that, in addition to other reasons, and most of these also, it's a single shareholder. They don't have a board. And so these clients have zero accountability. Like, their only accountability is like to their family, to make sure that, the monthly income is what they're hoping it would be. But, they don't have a bank to be accountable to. They don't have a board. They don't have other shareholders. So I can see where that accountability is something that they could be really helpful for them, that they don't really have anywhere else. Now, of course, they may have done that on purpose. Maybe they didn't really like being accountable. They were an accountable employee, and then they borrowed money from the bank to start a business. So maybe they don't really like being accountable. What do you think?
I have a client that's about 120 million revenue business in the, we'll call it, food production space. And he's very purposeful, has very good intentions for transition with his daughter over time, and really wants to see her be successful in the company and grow with the company. And his partner, to his credit, said, hey, not real name, Joe, you're going to we should do a new operating agreement. Your daughter's in the business now. She's doing a great job. We need a new operating agreement. And
Mhm.
this operating agreement was sitting on my client's desk, coffee stains, he literally had it in the corner of his desk. He told me he was there for 9 months. And then I met him in a workshop, and then that was it. He said, that's it. I have to do something. I can't just keep looking at that document. And of course, in the transition, it's more than just the operating agreement, but it was so many other things too.
Sure.
And he just, the accountability was really good for him. He needed that. He really did. Because he had the intention to do it. It just was, back burnered, and it was never the thing to do when all these other important things are coming at him.
No, that makes sense. And I just wanted to be clear, businesstransitionbook.com or business transition handbook?
The Business Transition Handbook.com.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I had it
Yeah, that's
all.
okay. It's the title of the book. Yeah.
Oh, it's the exact, okay. Yeah, I'm looking at the book. Okay. That's easy
That's
enough to
okay.
remember.
Yeah.
That is easy enough to remember. What do you enjoy the most about your podcast? Kind of switching gears a little bit. What do
I
you particularly
love
enjoy?
talking with people on my show about what's worked for them, what they've learned, and what they would do differently. And if I
Yeah.
have an entrepreneur, I have two kinds of entrepreneurs that come on the show. One type is looking in the rear view mirror,
Mhm.
and that's where they'll get the lessons learned, right? We really learn a
Mhm.
lot from others where it just didn't quite go the way they would have liked. And when they have successes, of course, we learn a lot from that too. So that's one type of entrepreneur. The other type of entrepreneur is looking forward. And I've started to have more conversations with entrepreneurs, and I'm asking them questions about their legacy and how their intentions are for their transition and legacy, if they're open to sharing it. I've had a gentleman came on my show. He's in the HVAC space, and he had let his company, his partner, know his intentions to retire in 3 years. And it was almost like this huge weight was lifted off his shoulders. And now that it's out there, they can create plans, they can, work on things. And it's a little bit freeing to do something like that. Other people who aren't quite ready to say what it is they want to do, we talk a little more generally about what's important to them as they think about transition and leaving a meaningful legacy for their stakeholders or family or employees. And I'm really enjoying those conversations. I also talk with people who are experts in the industry on some particular topic, like
Like
tax
Mike.
advisors, financial advisors, legal advisors. And those conversations are wonderful because then as I build my Rolodex of professionals that are able to be the best fit for my clients, it's a wonderful way to do business development. And people who listen to the show have, not every listener becomes a client, but I have had, listeners reach out. They've listened to Succession Stories for a year, 2 years, whatever it is. And they reach out and they say, Laurie, I'm a longtime fan, would love to talk with you. And the resources that are available from the show are on my website, like business assessments and different articles and knowledge articles and plenty of videos and podcasts to help people learn about different topics. So I feel like this body of knowledge, this thought leadership type of approach where if people listen, they learn about me, they learn about what they do, and then maybe they want to follow up, is pretty exciting. So I really like that. I like when I hear from my audience and they tell me what's an interesting topic to them or questions they might have. And I think the learning is really the main thing. I'm a continuous learner. I always have been. And I find that with every show, I'm learning something. I'm learning something every time. And I just love that.
Yeah, and I've probably listened to half of your episodes, I suppose. And that episode you had with Mike Silverman was really memorable. That have had introduced several clients to Mike, and so I think having the advisors on is also a great idea. And that's kind of how you fit, sort of on my show, right? We're not talking about the IC disc program at all. But you're somebody who my clients outside the IC disc may find value to this conversation. And yeah, and I'm like you. I love to hear people's stories. On the Colby, I'm an 8643, which I don't know if you know the Colby.
I do know the Colby.
So that's what's called high fact finding.
Okay.
So I lead with the fact finding. So for me, I'm always more comfortable asking questions than answering them. Maybe that's from childhood trauma where I was forced to answer too many uncomfortable questions by my parents. I don't know.
Amazing.
Well, I can't believe how the time has flown by. By the way, what's your website?
My website is thebusinesstransitionSherpa.com.
Oh, okay. I like it.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention, David, because
Yeah.
if your listeners are finding this topic helpful, that's good, and then they probably might be wondering, well, what's the next step? Or, how do I sort of take small nibbles as opposed to biting off a whole arm? And I would recommend that. I don't want people to feel overwhelmed. I want them to feel reassured that we have a process and we'll work with them to meet them where they are. And I guess the next thing would be to reach out, and whether they are in a mode of transition and planning, which is what I'll call pre-M&A, right? Not that they have to sell, but just conceptually. And then for folks who are anticipating selling to a third party or an ESOP or a family member, that transaction somehow, some way. So I'm a certified mergers and acquisitions advisor and can help steer them on that path from the practical side as well as the emotional side to get a deal done that makes them happy.
Okay. I like it. If people want to reach out to you, is LinkedIn probably the best way?
Yeah, LinkedIn's a great way. And let me know that you heard me on the show. That would be awesome. And I think, David, you'd probably love to know that too. And they could reach me on my website, as you said, the Business Transition Sherpa. There's a spot to book directly with me. We can connect via Calendly.
Okay. And then what's the website for the podcast?
Successionstories.com
Okay.
is the name of the show. And again, you can find it directly on my website in the podcast section. All the catalog of the shows are there, but it's in every type of platform. So if you're Apple or Spotify or whatever you like, you'll find it.
That's great. So here's the surprise question I promised you. So I have two questions left. And so here comes the surprise one. So if you could go back in time and give advice to your 25-year-old self, what advice might you give?
I think I should have bought a business.
Okay. So you would have encouraged yourself to buy a business?
Yes. When I was 25 and I was graduating from my master's program, it was all about the next great tech startup.
Yeah.
And creating that from scratch. And that wasn't me.
Yeah.
But I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I just didn't feel like that was me in that mold.
Mm-hmm.
And I think now I'm more attuned to entrepreneurs through acquisition, as a category. And I didn't mention them, but they also would fall under the financial buyer category.
Sure.
And there are many, many of them out there, not just in the US, but around the world, who are interested in being part of that succession plan for a founder or next generation leader.
Do you ever listen to the My First Million podcast? Have you ever heard of that?
It's been a while, but I'm familiar with it. You like that show?
They had a guest on recently that is probably certainly my top 5 favorite podcast interviews ever. And it's about a woman, Sarah, I forget her last name, but she was getting her MBA and decided she was going to buy a business and she had zero money. She was going to buy a business, like these real estate advertisements, buying real estate with no money down. She was going to buy a business with no money down. And it's just a fascinating story of the process she went through, and just an astonishingly wonderful interview that I couldn't recommend highly enough. So apparently she was able to somehow go back in time and give her 25-year-old self that advice, because she managed to pull that off.
That's very cool.
Is there anything we didn't cover that you wish we had?
Well, I think just to reiterate for people that when time is on your side, you can make an impact on your future, and give yourself the space to work on your business and not just in your business. That would
Mhm.
probably be my main advocacy, and surround yourself with people that can help hold you accountable to the process and meet you where you are. So if they are just thinking about it, trying to figure it out, trying to understand what's their business worth today, yeah, that's a great place to start too. Try to figure out and model, where are you now? Where do you want to be? And then what's the gap? And how are you going to get there?
That's awesome. Well, Laurie, I really, really appreciate your time on the show, and I appreciate you taking the time to be on here.
Well, David, thank you for having me. I know this is my second time around. You and I talked on a different show
We
way
did,
back
yeah.
when.
Yeah, we
But
did. It was,
it's lovely to be back with you and reconnect. And I'm just so glad that you are sharing this content with your audience, and I appreciate you. Thank you.
yeah, it is my pleasure. Well, I hope you have a great day.
You too.